Welcome, everyone, to the NFL Week 5 prop show with Thursday night football kicking off to start off NFL Week 5. We'll have our second international game happening on Sunday across the pond as well. Of course, you guys know how we do it here on the prop show. I'm your host, Munaf Manji. You can find me on the Twitter machine at SportsNerd824. And joining me, I've got my guys here with me. First up is the man himself, the Giants fan. Hoping Malik Neighbors plays this week. I know he's dealing with some type of injury there, but Steve Reeder, see what's going on, my man. How you doing?
Nothing much, man. We got New York baseball on right now. The Mets are in a winner go home game right now. I know my boy Cerule's watching it, so I'm keeping an eye on it for him as well. Got to find some happiness right now in the New York fan base. So, obviously the Knicks got Cat, which I'm not excited about. The Giants are terrible. Probably lost Neighbors for this week, and the Yankees are going to inevitably implode in the playoffs. So my only hope is the Mets in this game.
So you're a Mets fan, not a Yankees fan, then I'm assuming.
I'm a Yankees fan, but my
Okay.
buddy is a big Mets fan, and for me, that's good enough. So I'm going to root for his happiness because I know I won't by my own. So,
All right, fair enough. And also joining us here tonight, as usual, it's Sleepy J. Sleepy, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
Well, I'm not able to watch the Mets game, but I am a Mets fan. So at least me and Steve share, a little something that's alike. But hey, shout out to the Cincinnati Porch crew. Those guys sent me a bunch of stuff last year, nice little swag bag. So I went ahead, I donned the Jamar Chase jersey for those guys. So shout out to those guys. I'm ready to rock and roll this week.
Heck yeah, man. Looking fresh on the Jamar Chase jersey there. And also, of course, Jamar Chase was one of our player props. I know a couple of weeks ago that got us to the window. So that jersey probably feels a little bit sweeter to wear. And speaking of our player prop best bet, we did improve to 3-1 on the season for our Monday Night Football player prop best bet. We had Jackson Smith-Njigba to go over 48.5 receiving yards. I believe this number closed at 50.5, and I don't know how the books do it, but they do it. He ends up with 51 receiving yards, and that's why we always say when we're talking about these player prop best bets that you want to get to that number as early as you can. And since we do it for Monday night, everybody has plenty of time to get to those early numbers, at least. But nonetheless, another winner for us and improves us to 3-1 on the season through the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, firing at 75%. So hopefully we can continue the winning ways here on the Monday Night Football game for our player prop best bet, which will be the New Orleans Saints playing the Kansas City Chiefs. So definitely excited for that game, of course. We've been doing pretty good, guys. I think it was another great week for all of us on our props. So hopefully we can continue that here going into NFL Week 5. Week 5 typically means we've got bye weeks starting. I know 4 teams are on a bye this week. And like I mentioned, we have an early game on Sunday between the Vikings and the Jets across the pond there. And speaking of those Jets, in rumors to possibly reunite Devante Adams with his former quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. We did see last week that quote unquote Devante Adams dealing with a hamstring injury, possibly has played his last game in a uniform for the Las Vegas Raiders. And it seems like it's down to really 2 teams, according to his quote unquote wish list, which is the New Orleans Saints with his former quarterback. That was with the Raiders, Derek Carr. And of course, his other former quarterback, where he spent early part of his career, where he had plenty of success, at least filling up the stat sheet with Mr. Aaron Rodgers here. So it seems like there's some turmoil in Las Vegas, we should say, with the Raiders here. But Steve, let me start with you on the Devante Adams news. I think for a lot of people, this doesn't really come as a shock. I think it was a matter of when and not if for Devante Adams. And it seems like inevitably that he is going to end up back with his, in my opinion, at least, with his former quarterback in Aaron Rodgers here. But what are your thoughts on this Devante Adams story that's transpired early part of this week?
Yeah, this is not something that's new. I think it's been percolating for a while, especially in the offseason. And it makes a lot of sense for Vegas. They're not a team that's ready to compete. They should really be looking to acquire assets right now, build around the new coach. They really need a new quarterback as well. Minshew's cute and O'Donnell, obviously, but neither one are great. So they really would be beneficial for them if they actually, I don't want to say tank the year, but basically prioritize their future over this. So I think from their perspective, it's a good decision. Now you go over to the Jets, you see Aaron Rodgers claiming that he's got a swollen knee. He's complaining at odds with the coaches about how they should run their offense. And frankly, the Jets are tied to this. They don't have much of a choice. So I think that there's a little pressure just internally to get somebody to kind of placate Rodgers. I think it might have been a mistake giving him the power that he has. But if you're going to give him that power, you might as well give him the keys to drive the car, so to speak. I don't know how much of a difference maker he is going to be for that team. Obviously, you see Garrett Wilson is not being productive right now. Breece Hall is not productive for that team. I think there's a lot of turmoil with that team right now that I think Devante Adams is not going to solve. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'd be more inclined that if the Raiders were willing to absorb some of that money, I'd love to see him go to KC. Rumor has it they're willing to part with the draft picks, but not actually pay him his exorbitant salary. So it'll be interesting, something to keep an eye on. Odds are he goes to the Jets, and I don't think it makes much of a difference for that team.
Yeah, I think what I read that as each week progresses here, I believe the cap hit decreases by close to $1 million for Devante Adams' services. And I think obviously with the Rashee Rice injury for Kansas City, it makes tons of sense for him to be a part of the Chiefs organization. But obviously, I don't think Mark Davis and the crew there are going to want to trade him inside the division there to just give even more weapons to Mr. Patrick Mahomes, who are seeking their third title in a row, going for the three-peat here. Sleepy, thoughts on Devante Adams? You think, you're the Packers fan. You've seen Aaron Rodgers and Devante Adams together for so many years. It feels like it makes a lot of sense as well. But in your eyes, do you think the better landing spot for him is with the Saints, or is it with Aaron Rodgers with the Jets?
I think it's probably got to be Aaron Rodgers. It's not like Derek Carr's, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league. If you stick him with Rodgers on that team, I think the thing that the Jets have to kind of figure out, what do we do with Lazard? Is he okay taking a back seat? Because, he came with Aaron Rodgers when he came to the Jets, and it's one of those situations where is he going to be upset? Is he going to be happy being a number 3? Because Devante Adams becomes either the number 1 or the number 2 on that team. Aaron Rodgers and Devante Adams, they develop together. So let's just say Adams comes in week 1. There will be plays called in the huddle that Devante Adams and Aaron Rodgers know exactly where they need to be and what's going to happen. The rest of the team doesn't need to know, but they can immediately go ahead, dial him up, and get him involved into the playbook. I think that it becomes kind of like a more or less a world championship type of offense if you add this guy into the mix, just because you get Rodgers comfortable. Let's not forget how many games Aaron Rodgers has played right now for the New York Jets total. It's not many. Yeah. So he's still in the learning process. If you could bring him in somebody that he doesn't have to learn with, that could at least move the chains. And that was like one of Adams' big things when he was with Rodgers. He can get you the first down. He can move the chains, extend the drive, and figure it out along the way. That's kind of where I think Rodgers is missing right now. He's trying to figure it out, but he doesn't have the end-all be-all answer, and that end-all be-all answer for him when he was with Green Bay was Devante Adams. So I think adding him makes a big difference. So, yeah, I hope he lands there. That would be cool. I could see things kind of getting smoothed out a little bit in New York. And I will say this: if they bring Devante Adams in and they don't win, it gives the New York Jets general managers and their brass, they can easily point the finger at Aaron Rodgers and say, look, we gave this guy everything we needed. We gave him his shiny new toys. We gave him his secret weapon. It hasn't worked. And then they can do what they need to do. So I think bringing Adams in is a help actually to those guys shifting the blame if all things don't work out here.
Yeah, it seems like there's also a rift with Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of him as a head coach, at least. I mean, I think defensively he's a great mind when it comes to defensive side of the football. But I think when it comes to talking about being a head coach of an entire football team, I think there's definitely some question marks there. And I think Sleep, you made up said a great point there that it's only been a handful of games that Aaron Rodgers actually played with this Jets organization and this offense, right? Because he hasn't had a lot of time with the injury last season and in the offseason as well, the darkness retreat and not playing in preseason. So that this month of September was at least a extended preseason for him and trying to build rapport with some of the guys there. And like you mentioned, Garrett Wilson, who was coming into the season going to be a guy that was probably leading in targets and receptions this season just because he had Aaron Rodgers there, just hasn't panned out yet. So we'll see what transpires with Devante Adams. As right now, the wish list, quote unquote, for him is down to the Jets and the New Orleans Saints. So we'll put a bow on that. And of course, if there is more activity that happens on the Devante Adams front, we'll definitely discuss it on the pod next week. Gentlemen, let's put a bow on week 4. Let's get into NFL week 5 here. Like I mentioned, 4 teams on the bye. We have a game early on Sunday morning across the pond as well, the second international game. But let's start it here with our quarterback prop. Sleepy, why don't you lead us off this week? Quarterback prop, where are you taking us?
I'm taking you to Miami. So Sleepy went dumpster diving. I'm going with Dolphins quarterback Tyler Huntley over 159.5 passing yards. This isn't hard to achieve in terms of yards needed from any quarterback in the league. And when you have Tyreek Hill and you have Waddle and you have Achane out of the backfield, I think you give yourself a good chance to go ahead and pick up yards, but pick up yards in bunches because those guys are dynamic players that can make big plays throughout the game. Huntley was new to the offense last week, so I know he didn't have a great game. He only ended up throwing for 96 yards, but it's another week with these players. You can throw on New England. New England allows the 5th most passing yards in the entire league. I think another week of Huntley at practice, I think that that's going to be a big help. I have higher expectations versus the market with this particular number and this particular quarterback. It's not like Huntley does not know how to play this position. He's played this position for a number of years now, and there's a reason why he's quarterback in the Miami Dolphins right now, because he knows how to play quarterback. I think there's just too many playmakers here. I think the Patriots could be thrown on. I'm playing Tyler Huntley over 159.5 passing yards.
Seems like this was a similar situation where we saw Malik Willis in his second start against the Titans. I know, quote unquote, it was a revenge factor, but I just think that it gives it a little bit more time for Tyler Huntley to be with those receivers, the dynamic speed receivers that they have with the Miami Dolphins, with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, like you mentioned there, Devon Achane as well, who had in the first couple of weeks been very, very lethal out of the backfield for the Miami Dolphins. So I think this is a good opportunity for the Dolphins team to bounce back. And I think that this is a true test now for their coach, Coach McDaniels, now to put a game plan together, because that offense, when Tua was in there, at least was really firing on all cylinders with, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill there. Steve, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's interesting because McDaniel should be able to orchestrate something. It's another week in the system. You kind of saw what he was able to produce on the field. And what's so great about the Dolphins is that they have explosive playmakers all over the field. You get the ball into their hands, let them do the work. So he should be able to scheme some stuff up that could just be a simple pass play that gets something huge down the field. On the same side of things, like if there's a little bit of pressure, he could buy some time and throw that deep pass. Like he missed a couple passes that were really close. That could have gone for huge gains in the last game. So I think that in this one, I'd anticipate him having a little bit more success throwing the ball downfield on those big plays. And certainly there's always that opportunity for Hill and Waddle to take a small play and make it a big one.
It would probably just take one deep pass to Tyreek Hill to achieve half of the yardage total here for Tyler Huntley here in week 5. All right, Steve, take us over to your quarterback prop, man. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going Gardner Minshew under 195.5 passing yards. And this was released a little bit earlier today by another group. So we did lose a little bit of value, but I still think there's avenues to cash this ticket. Let's take a look at Denver's defense. They've surrendered the 3rd lowest passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. The game is in Mile High, which is historically a very difficult place to play, specifically in the beginning part of the season. In Denver's only home start this year, they held Justin Fields to 117 passing yards. And I know what you're thinking. It's Justin Fields. Is this what we're really staking a claim on? This is what we're betting on? But take a look at Justin Fields' other 3 games. He's actually averaged 238 yards passing yards per game. And it was only 117 he was able to secure with Denver. So that defense is extraordinarily stout, specifically against the pass. And Minshew has self-inflicted wounds to overcome as well. Minshew struggles against pressure, only completing 48.3% of his passes under pressure, and Denver is 5th in the league in blitz pressure rate. His wide receiver 1, Devante Adams, is injured / requesting a trade / not reporting. I don't know what you want to call it at this point. It's also completely possible that he gets benched in favor of Aiden O'Connell, just like he did in week 3 if things go awry. So ultimately, I don't think Minshew makes it through the game. And even if he does, I think he'd be hard pressed to eclipse this number. I like under 195.5 passing yards.
Sleepy, any thoughts on Gardner Minshew here against the Denver Broncos this week in a divisional matchup?
It's a tough spot. I actually was looking at this too, and I thought the first thing that Steve was thinking was he could get benched. And if that's the case, you have no chance to go ahead and hit this prop. So, yeah, I would be with Steve on this one. If no Devante Adams it's going to be tough.
All right, let me get over to my quarterback prop this week. And you guys probably want to take this with a grain of salt because I am 0-4 this season on the quarterback props, but everywhere else I'm finding success here. And we talked about Aaron Rodgers earlier in this episode with Devante Adams and such, but I'm looking at his pass attempts to go over 33.5 in this game against the Minnesota Vikings. And we mentioned, right, this is going to be a game across the pond early on Sunday morning. And it's really predicated on what this Minnesota Vikings defense has been able to do this season. Their rush defense has been the second best in this early part of the year, only trailing the Baltimore Ravens, right? The rush defense are allowing the third least yards per carry thus far this season at only 3.8, the second least amount of rushing yards per game there as well. So what does that mean? Vikings are forcing offense to throw the football. And let's take a look at the numbers of pass attempts this season for opposing quarterbacks up against the Vikings, right? Daniel Jones, week 1, had 42 pass attempts. Brock Purdy, 36. CJ Stroud, 43. Jordan Love, 54. And the Vikings have been able to build a leads early in these games, double-digit leads, and quarterbacks have been having to throw the football. Is there a possibility that it can happen again for the Minnesota Vikings? Absolutely, because nobody has proven otherwise, at least through the first 4 weeks where they've looked like legit such Super Bowl contenders. I mean, at this juncture, people would probably say, just give the Super Bowl trophy right now to the Minnesota Vikings because of how dominant they have been. So I think that if the Vikings are able to build this lead early in this game, I think that'll force Aaron Rodgers to throw the football here. And I'm really a huge believer in what Brian Flores has been able to do for this Minnesota Vikings, in particular, their rush defense, which has been absolutely fantastic for this team thus far this season. So I'll take the over 33.5 pass attempts here for Aaron Rodgers in this game here, Sleepy. I'll turn this one over to you.
Well, I'm not a Vikings fan at all, but I will give them a little bit of credit. They're playing good football. They will go ahead and they'll put some pressure on Rodgers. The only thing that worries me about this specific prop is that they've been unable to go ahead and get Breece Hall going.
Yeah.
And I think in order for this Jets offense to kind of operate and have success, they do have to get to a little bit more of the run because it seems like Rodgers is just a little bit of inconsistent on where he wants to go with the football. So I don't know if he'll get, a ton of passes like you're thinking here. I was kind of thinking maybe this would be like a Breece Hall type of game where they would just try to grind this team down because this is kind of, the MO of the Jets and look really towards slowing this game down and just trying to run a little bit. That's what I originally thought when I looked at this game and looked at all the player props for it. But ultimately I went ahead and I kind of just shied away a little bit because the Jets haven't shown me what I thought I would see from them, and I never expected this from the Vikings. So I'm kind of just on the sidelines with this one, but that's my initial reaction to your pick there.
All right, so that is round 1 of our player props, our quarterback props. Let's turn the page here. Let's get over to our running back props here for NFL Week 5. Steve, why don't you lead us off? Running back prop.
I'm going Derrick Henry over 82.5 rushing yards. He tends to start every year off slow. It's something I've been looking at the last couple of years. And this year is really no different. I mean, if you just take a look at his rushing totals so far this season, he's got 46, 84 in game 2, 151, and 199 last week. I think that's on pace, and with that trend line, maybe 475 rushing yards this week. The dude is on a tear. And Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, was brought in to create a more of like an up-tempo style of offense. But he's been actually leaning more into the Greg Roman style of play calling recently, and it's been advantageous to that Ravens ground game. I mean, it's not even just their success that I like this play. It's actually Cincinnati's lack of ability to stop the run. I mean, Cincinnati has allowed 145 rushing yards per game. It's 8th worst in the league, and their defensive rush EPA is bottom 5 in the league. On top of that, Cincinnati has 2 defensive linemen, a middle linebacker that's both banged up or questionable for the game. It looks like they should at least get one of the defensive linemen back, but how healthy are they going to be? How they weren't great at stopping the run when they were in there. So now, even if they're banged up, I expect them to have more difficulties here. We have a lot going in our favor. We have Henry's trend line is going through the roof. The play calling has been more advantageous to the ground game, as I mentioned. They have a defense that has struggled to stop the run with some of the most important run defenders banged up. I think Henry clears this total fairly easy. Give me over 82.5 rushing yards on Sunday.
You don't have to tell me about King Henry. When he was in our division with the going up against the Texans, he would absolutely just mow them down, getting north of 150 plus yards. And you mentioned, right? I think the key there is that he gets off the slow starts, but he's able to just ramp it up and just find that second gear throughout the season. And again, like you mentioned, over the back-to-back weeks here, 150 plus rushing yards, 151 against the Cowboys, 199 against the Buffalo Bills here. And again, we've talked a lot about how the Cincinnati defense is completely different without DJ Reader, who was pretty much their run stopper last season, who's now with the Detroit Lions. And it hasn't been very good thus far this season for that rushing defense of the Cincinnati Bengals here. So it should be a big week here for Derrick Henry again, who already this season, 480 rushing yards, already has 5 rushing touchdowns through the first 4 weeks of the regular season. Sleepy, take us over to your running back prop, man. What do you got?
All right. So let me give some props first to Derrick Henry. Did you guys see how fast that dude is? For as big as he is, to outrun that entire team is just insane. And then they were talking about, how punishing he is. And then it was no more than like a couple runs later, he basically just flatlined one of the defensive backs. And he just shook his head like, why the hell did I try to, stand in front of this dude? Like, that's not a guy I'd want to have to try to chase down, and certainly not a guy I'd want to have to go ahead and try to tackle. He's he is amazing, and it's cool that he's still able to go this late in his career with all the miles. So, props to him. My running back prop, I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs over 65.5 rushing yards. I thought last week would have been a good week for Jacobs. I talked about that a little bit on the podcast, but the Packers, they got down big in that game against the Vikings, and they had no choice but to go ahead and throw the football. And I think that was actually a good thing for Jacobs coming into this week, because he only had to run the ball last week 9 times. He gobbled up 51 yards, 5.7 yards per carry, but I think that Jacobs is going to be fresh as a daisy here. The Rams' rush defense, worst in the league. Jacobs should have a big day. Jordan Love, he dropped back a ton last week, and he was coming back from injury. And it's like, do we want to have this guy dropping back a ton right now coming back? Lean on Jacobs. Jacobs going to go well over this number. I would consider an alternate prop here. I think Jacobs probably gets close to 100 yards, and that'll be a nice plus price, but 65.5 rushing yards here, it's just not enough. Josh Jacobs over 65.5 rushing yards.
Steve, any thoughts on Josh Jacobs for this week?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams aren't a very good defense right now. They surrender, looking at the EPA numbers, that they're might be the worst in the league. They're second worst in the league to Washington, supposedly. So I think there's an avenue there. I do think that Love is going to have a good game. I do expect them to win. So I think game script could lend itself to Josh Jacobs going over. I don't really have much in the way of studying done for this particular play, but it makes a lot of sense just looking at the game itself.
Yeah, 131 yards per game. The Rams are giving up on the ground 4.81 yards per carry. And teams they're running the football against them. They're averaging 27 carries per game. So again, if Josh Jacobs does get the carries here in this game, if the Packers are playing from ahead, you just want to turn around and hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs and able to rack up the yards against this Rams rushing or lack thereof, I should say, defense. All right, for my running back prop here, I'm going to stay in that same game that Steve talked about. I'm going to go the other side. I'm going to take Zach Moss under 41.5 rushing yards in this game. And it's a complete opposite of what, Steve talked about with the Bengals, and how I mentioned that the Ravens have been one of the better rush defenses this league and or thus far this season. In fact, they've been the best. They're allowing the least amount of rushing yards per game, and also yards per carry thus far this season. And there's only been one running back this season that's had more than 42 rushing yards against the Baltimore Ravens. And that was all the way back in week 1, which was Isaiah Pacheco, and he had to get that done in 15 carries. The Bengals, they're running a 2-back rotation, right? It's Chase Brown and it's Zach Moss. And I think with Zach Moss, snap counts have diminished over each of the last 3 weeks. He's only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. And if this is another situation where the Baltimore Ravens do get out to a lead early and they're playing from behind, as they have been, or the Cincinnati Bengals have through the first 4 weeks, except for that game against the Panthers, it's just going to make Joe Burrow throw the football here, having to rely on Jamar Chase, having to rely on T. Higgins, the tight ends there, and they're probably going to have to get away from that running game here. And I don't think this is going to be the week where they can rely on the running game, just because the Ravens rush defense has been so great this season. So Zach Moss under 41.5 rushing yards here. Sleep. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I like this one. I'd be with you on this one. You cannot run between the gaps against this Ravens defense. You have to have elite talent out of the backfield to get around the edges in order to go ahead and get away probably from those linebackers as well too, to pick up yards on this Ravens rush defense. It's elite. Zach Moss doesn't have those type of skills, and like you were saying, it was a little bit of a struggle for a guy like Pacheco. Those guys aren't even in the same. They're not even in the same category. The Bengals don't have a viable option to go ahead and run against this team, so I'd be with you all day.
All right, running back props in the books here for week 5. Let's turn the page here. Let's get over to the wide receiver / tight end props. Sleepy, lead us off. Where are we going here?
Wide receiver prop, Chiefs wide receiver Xavier Worthy over 40.5 yards. Worthy, obviously right now is going to end up being the Chiefs' #1 wide receiver option. Rashid Rice now out. Worthy's going to have probably all the plays that were in the playbook. He's going to end up having them dialed up here this week, I think, by Andy Reid. This guy has a ton of speed, and he also has Mahomes throwing him the football. That's a pretty good combination to have. What I don't think we've seen yet with Worthy, at least this season, is a bunch of targets. And I think that you have no choice but to go ahead and throw this dude as many footballs as possible this week. You take Pacheco out, you take Rice out, you have a lot of options there. But don't forget, like, you have 3 tight ends on this Kansas City Chiefs team. It's like, well, how much you can't disguise a whole lot just with the tight end. So I could see a lot of targets going here towards Worthy, and this is another guy that will take the top off you. I think he had 3 catches last week for like almost 75 yards. He has a ton of speed. And if Mahomes gets, more than enough cracks to go ahead and try to find something and try to squeeze something in there for him, and this guy catches it, he's going to end up probably eclipsing us in 2 catches. So this number, in my opinion, is just wrong. I think that this is an extremely square play, but I think this is one that we have to make right now, because this could end up going to 75 yards next week or the week after, just based on the amount of targets. And we see it's like, all right, cool, like this guy's the real deal, because people were talking about this guy, in a real positive light in the beginning of the year. I think he ended up having a touchdown, a pretty good first game. Kind of slowed down a little bit because Rashid Rice did Rashid Rice things. But yeah, I think Xavier Worthy this week is definitely worth a shot. It is square, I'll agree to that, but I think the number's wrong at 40.5.
Yeah, and what you mentioned, right, with Rashid Rice being down, and they also already lost Hollywood Brown at the beginning of the year as well, right? So they're already thin at that wide receiver position, are the Kansas City Chiefs. I know they have 3 guys at the tight end position, led by Travis Kelce, who finally had his breakout game last week. But like you mentioned, this is a guy like the with the Worthy that, like you mentioned, can take the top off of the defense. And honestly, could get this in 1 catch because he has that type of speed. Last week, he got this in 1 catch. He had a 54-yard reception. So, you get a couple of targets going his way. He's had at least 4 targets in each of the last 3 weeks, but that numbers should go up this week, just based on the availability for this wide receiving group. And sometimes the best thing for a team is being available. And right now, he is available for this this Chiefs offense right now. So yeah, I would be with you with this one for sure. Steve, take us over to your wide receiver prop, man. What do you got for this week?
Yeah, I'm looking at DK Metcalf over 23.5, longest reception here. And Metcalf has hit this number in 3 of his 4 games so far this year. And despite the poorest offensive line, Geno Smith is still slinging darts and has looked DK's way 32 times in those 3 games. He's eclipsed 100 receiving yards in that same time frame. And what exactly makes us think that the Giants have the personnel to stop DK? At the start of the year, Mike Clay ranked both the New York Giants cornerback group and the safety position group as the worst in each category in the NFL. So they haven't got anybody good. I mean, Adoree Jackson came in. The guy is hot garbage. I don't even know if he's going to play this week. He's constantly banged up. He certainly doesn't tackle anybody. And there hasn't been much since that's changed the narrative of this poor secondary play. Conceivably, the Giants should be able to get home against this Seattle offensive line, But on the plays where they don't, the defense's back end is going to have their hands full. I expect a lot of boom or bust potential in this game for the Seattle offense. And I think DK Metcalf is going to be the beneficiary. So give me DK Metcalf over 23.5 longest reception.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I think of DK Metcalf, I think of chasing down was it Buda Baker a few seasons ago on that interception. He just has that yards after catch ability, but also the downfield threat for this team. And like you mentioned, Geno Smith has been able to find him over the past couple of weeks here, and I think it was on full display on Monday Night Football against the Lions. Even though I know we had that JSN best bet prop that did get us the window, but it's really been the DK Metcalf show. And I don't blame the Seattle offense and Geno Smith trying to get him the football, because this guy can get it done for you in multiple ways. So I think again, just very, very underrated, I feel like, is DK Metcalf. All right, let me get over to my wide receiver prop here. And Sleepy, you mentioned that you probably have the square play of the week, but I will give you the square play of the week here. Stephon Diggs over 53.5 receiving yards. Look, I know they are playing the Bills this week, and it's against his former team, and that's really the narrative. And no, I've been keeping an eye on it, obviously, with this being my team, the Houston Texans, and he's saying all the right things to the media, right? I mean, he's not going to come out and say anything outrageous, but it's like any other player, right? They want to stick it to their former team. And I know Nico Collins has by far been the number one target for this Houston Texans team, and he's leading the league right now in receiving yards is Nico Collins. But I believe this is the Diggs game this week. Just to reference it, I guess I should say, we know that Diggs, there's always those video clips and things of him on the sidelines, maybe quote unquote being drama or whatever the case might be. But I think he's a petty guy, and I think that he's going to want to stick it to his former team. So when he got traded from the Minnesota Vikings, he's played them twice, once with the Buffalo Bills and then once with the Houston Texans, which was earlier this week. The first game against the Vikings, where he did get traded, 12 receptions, 128 yards. This season, week 3, with the Texans against his former team, the Vikings, Diggs had 10 receptions for 94 yards. So it's not a big number here, a monumental number of 53.5 receiving yards here for Stephon Diggs. But I think this could be one of the higher scoring games this week, and I know that he will get the targets. I know Tank Dell is returning for this Houston Texas team as well, but I do feel like this is going to be the week where Stephon Diggs can get at least 54 receiving yards against his former team in the Buffalo Bills there. So I'm not sure it'll be a point of emphasis to get him the ball or force feed him, but I know the targets are going to be there for Stephon Diggs because they have been over the first 4 weeks here for the Texans and Stephon Diggs here. So I feel like this number was a little low despite him going up against his former team. It's just extra motivation there. But Stephon Diggs over 53.5 receiving yards here. Sleepy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I looked at this game, I thought maybe pivot to CJ Stroud. And a lot of it was due to the Diggs angle because they can go to him and they can get him all these catches and yards, but they could also use him as like a decoy to kind of piss off Buffalo, thinking that they're going to go to him a ton here too. So that was my original thought. I'm not against your pick, but I actually think that it actually helps up at least a couple more avenues here, probably for Stroud to go ahead and have Buffalo maybe focusing on one guy a little bit more than anybody else. So I kind of like Stroud myself for that game.
All right. Let's get over to our last player props here. Sleepy, you want to lead us off, whether it's wide receiver or tight end? I'll give you the floor here.
Yeah, I got tight end prop for you guys this week. Chicago Bears tight end Cole Kmet over 27.5 receiving yards. Panthers, one of the worst teams defending against the tight end. Kmet has gone over this number in 2 games in a row, and he's one of the surest tight ends, when it comes to, good hands. Dude's very good. If you throw to him, he usually catches everything that you throw to him. The Panthers, they're a team that you can throw on because their linebacker position, it's just a complete mash unit right now, and the middle of the field's been open pretty much all year long for the tight end. So I think that, this is a team in Carolina where if you have a young quarterback like Caleb Williams, who, let's be honest, I've watched this guy last week and in week 1, and I thought he's nothing special, but maybe he just needs a team like the Carolina Panthers to kind of work out a little bit more of the wrinkles, some of the kinks where, there's not a whole lot of pressure on you. And I think that this is the perfect team for him to go out there and utilize maybe a security blanket like Komet. I don't know, 27.5 just feels very low for a sure-handed tight end against this Panthers team that just cannot stop the tight end. So I think that I think actually Williams will look half decent, and I think Komet's going to help him out there. So Chicago Bears tight end Cole Kmet over 27.5 receiving yards.
Steve, any thoughts on Komet for this week for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, my thoughts on Komet really come down to DJ Moore. I mean, DJ Moore was supposed to get like a ton of play. And I think there was a lot of hype for him in the offseason, and it hasn't really materialized. And I think a lot of it has to do with the play calling, which has kind of been the beneficiary to Cole Komet here. So I think the fact that they're not going to DJ Moore and looking underneath over the middle of the field to Komet should continue as the season progresses. So I think Komet's overs are still viable.
All right, Steve, your wide receiver or tight end prop for the final one this week. What do you got?
Yeah, so I went tight end last week, and I hit with Kyle Pitts. I said I gave out his under. He had 3 targets, no receptions, no yards. So I'm hoping that streak continues here. And I'm going to my buddy Mike Gesicki here. I'm going to go over 23.5 receiving yards. And the funny thing here is actually my first reaction looking at it, I was like, oh, I want to go under on Gesicki this week. He obviously didn't get a ton of looks last week. There's somebody else in the mix. But take a look at this. Mike only had 1 target last week, and the emergency of tight end Eric All has his stock tumbling, cratering at this point. And things may look great for Gesicki, but his demise is a little bit premature as far as I'm concerned. He was the starting tight end in 53% of his route shares, 14% target share on the season. His first read share was 17.8% share, which is pretty high for a tight end in that wide receiver group. And despite his low usage last week, he's still very much part of that offense. And this week he goes up against Baltimore, who's allowed the 2nd most receiving yards to tight ends this season. True story here. This is claim to fame. I'm sure he talks about playing against me. I did play against him one time when he was a freshman in high school, and I was a grown man. He was better than me then on the basketball court. He's going to be better than the Baltimore's defense this week on the football field. Give me Mike Gesicki, the New Jersey native, over 23.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, and I was looking at this in particular as well because you mentioned the Ravens have given up the 2nd most receiving yards to the tight end position, and it hasn't even been closer, giving up close to 82 receiving yards per game to that tight end position. But I think the only drawback that I had is that, like you mentioned, they have 3 different guys that can really catch the ball for them at the tight end position. They also got T. Higgins back as well, so that was the one thing that was kind of holding me off on this prop there. But again, like you mentioned, you laid out the numbers beautifully for Mike Gesicki there. And again, it's a buy low situation here as well because the yardage, we're not asking a whole heck of a lot because I think he could really get this done in 3 catches for the Cincinnati Bengals. And again, if they are playing from behind, I think there's an opportunity there for him to, get some of those check downs, or whether it's, in the middle of the field. I definitely think is a possibility here for Mike Gesicki this week for the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, for my last player prop, I also had a tight end prop this week, and something similar to what Stevie mentioned. They're kind of a buy low situation for some of these tight ends this week. And I'm looking at Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth to go over 32.5 receiving yards in this game. And I mean, you take a look, he's gone over this projection in all 4 weeks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know that Justin Fields hasn't really been a really productive throwing the football. It's really been run heavy for the Steelers team, right? Whether it's been Najee, whether it's been Cordero Patterson. But that running back room is now a little bit thin, right? Jaylen Warren continues to deal with an injury. Cordero Patterson left the game last week with an ankle injury. I was really high on Najee last week, but he just didn't pan out to go up against that Colts rush defense or like thereof, and just didn't have a big week there. So that's the part that made me nervous, coming into this week here. But no, Pat Freiermuth, he's as reliable as he comes. And I think there may be a more of an emphasis in the passing game this week, especially going up with a defense like the Dallas Cowboys, whose pass defense has absolutely been struggling. And I know Justin Fields isn't maybe at the caliber of the quarterbacks that the Cowboys have faced thus far this season. But I think there's definitely an opportunity here for Pat Freiermuth to have a big week as far as receiving yards here. Like I mentioned, he's done it in all 4 games. He's had at least 4 targets each of the first 4 weeks. He's had 12 total targets over the last 2 weeks as well. So I think this number 32.5 is a little bit conservative here for Pat Freiermuth. So over 32.5 receiving yards here for Pat Freiermuth here this week here, Sleepy.
Yeah, I dig this one. Go back to my Cole Kmet prop. Who was his number 1 guy when it was Justin Fields? It was Cole Kmet.
Yep.
So it wouldn't shock me if they end up getting Freiermuth, involved here. And you can throw on this team. Dallas is missing, a key pass rusher, best linebacker, arguably in the game. So it's going to be a big week here, I think, for Freiermuth, and give Justin Fields, some credit. Sometimes just a change of team, a change of scenery makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
We're seeing it right now with Sam Darnold, and I actually think that Justin Fields is playing half decent football, and this just might need to be where he needs to be right now. Yeah, so why not use Freiermuth? I mean, he likes the tight end, so I wouldn't be shocked if he goes well over.
Yeah, you could put Baker Mayfield on that list as well. You could probably even throw Derek Carr into that list as well. Just having a change of scenery really helps out these guys, getting or out of the situation that they were in previously. All right, so that is 12 total player props there for NFL Week 5. Hopefully, it will be. I'm confident another positive, profitable week for our player props here. Before we do get into the Monday Night Football game for NFL Week 5, a great time now to get over to pregame.com. A lot of very hot handicappers putting their head down, getting to work. We've got the college basketball season around the corner, NBA's around the corner as well. Obviously, still in full swing of the NFL season and college football as well. But Sleepy, let our listeners know what could they take advantage of right now on pregame.com.
Yeah, right now at pregame.com, you guys can go over there, save $15 off anything. Simply enter code NFL15. You got myself, you got Steve, you got Uncle Dave. We're all there at pregame.com giving out our best picks for football, baseball, basketball, whatever it might be. A little pound of my chest here. I'm on a 9-0 premium run in football. So on a little bit of a heater tonight. If you guys are, I'm on Atlanta on the money line tonight. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully I end up making the streak 10-0. But again, if you guys are looking to go ahead and save some money there on some picks there at pregame.com, simply enter code NFL15 at pregame.com.
Shameless plug for me as well. A 10-0 best bet run for myself and Griffin Warner on the MLB pod for our best bets there as well. So again, guys just putting their head down, getting over to work. We'll be biased here. Make sure you guys get over there, buy Sleepy's package, buy Steve's package there as well. The guys are putting in the work and hopefully putting more money in your pockets. Maybe you could buy a better Christmas gift this year for your loved ones, getting on their picks here for this season. All right, gentlemen, let's get over to Monday Night Football for Week 5. Pretty good matchup here. We got the New Orleans Saints. They're headed to Arrowhead Stadium to take on Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. As it stands right now, the Chiefs are a 5.5-point home favorite with a total of 43 in this game here. Steve, let me start with you on this game. Any thoughts either on the spread here or the total for this game between Saints and Chiefs?
Yeah, this one's interesting right now. KC, there was a sharp buy at -5. It was buy back at 6. It's been bouncing back and forth between the two. So you have competing groups that are believers in either team here. And I really don't know which side I come up on. I mean, part of me believes in the Saints a little bit here. I mean, obviously they played the Panthers to start the year. They blew them out. They played the Cowboys. They blew them out. How good are either one of those teams? I think the answer might be not very. They did play the Eagles and they lost by 3, and they played the Falcons and they lost by 2. But that game in particular was unbelievable. They actually allowed 2 defensive and a special teams touchdown there. So I think it was actually 2 defensive touchdowns, interception and then a fumble recovery in the end zone. So if you look at what the Saints have done defensively this year, they've only allowed 4 touchdowns the entire season. So I think that they're kind of an underrated group right now. And I think they're going up against a KC offense that obviously has question marks with the Rashi's injury concerns. And, KC hasn't been lighting the world on fire offensively. Mahomes has been a little bit slow, and they're laying a fair amount of points here at home. I know they're at home, and I know their win rate, and I know how awesome they've been recently, but they haven't looked quite right. They seem to win games, and they're concerned about winning games and not covering margin, and certainly not by that spread. So as far as I'm concerned, if I had to, gun to the head, I like the 5.5. I think the under 24.5 team total for KC is also worth a look. I admittedly haven't played either, but that's kind of where I'm leaning in this game.
All right, Sleepy, what are your thoughts for the side or total in this game between the Saints and the Chiefs?
I had a lot of thoughts on this one. Something that I haven't heard anybody say, which is surprising, and I haven't heard this all week long. tease up the Saints, get them up to, 11.5, 12.5, because it doesn't feel like Kansas City is going to be able to get a ton of margin in this game. I'm with Steve. I don't agree with the line at 5.5. I think it's just a little bit too high. The Chiefs are going to need a lot of help probably from the referees in order to go ahead and beat me, on my teaser pick. So I would tease there first. Now, the other play I was looking at, and this is more or less probably going to be a live play, and I'm looking at maybe second quarter under. And the reason I say that is I think Kansas City's defense is going to be able to figure out Derek Carr relatively quick. And I think the Saints defense is going to, have some favors done for them. The fact that Kansas City's going to struggle to find some offense in this game, and I think it will come in the second quarter. These teams generally, they end up, having scripted plays, and I think that they can end up running out of some plays. And generally, the second quarter, was a quarter that's generally lined a little bit higher. I think there might be some value maybe looking at that under in the second quarter. So that's just something that I was thinking about, maybe a play that I'll be looking for in game. But yeah, I would tease the Saints up. I don't know how the Chiefs end up getting a ton of margin in this game. Would it shock anybody if the Chiefs lost this game? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I think that number one, Derek Carr, familiar with this Chiefs team because he was with the Raiders so many years, and I know he hasn't fared very well in his career against his Kansas City Chiefs. He played them 17 times head to head, just 3-14 straight up in those games. 1-8 on the road in Arrowhead is Derek Carr. Since the 2018 season, when he was with the Raiders, I should say, 5-7 against the spread there. So I mean, not significant numbers there, but I'm with you guys. The Chiefs going back, I mean, under the Mahomes era or past couple seasons, it's a team that hasn't really been winning by margins, and sometimes it just feels like, especially this season, that it's been coming down to the wire, and that they've been beneficiary of some questionable calls that have been in their favor when it comes from the referees, right? I think there was that missed PI call in the end zone there. I believe it was Drake London in that Monday Night Football game against the Falcons. We saw it against the Bengals there as well on that it was like 4th and 16 there. So, Mahomes has been able to pull off the magic and find ways to win games, but I feel like this number is a bit of a stretch here at 5.5. I'd be with you guys. I would take the points here with the New Orleans Saints in this game. And again, we don't know what this offense is going to look like now. Who's going to get the production here for this Kansas City Chiefs team, right? Because no Rashee Rice, we mentioned no Hollywood Brown since the beginning of the year. Yes, Travis Kelce had a big week last week, but it's like something that can carry over into this week against the Saints. It's a possibility, but I think this offense can start looking a little bit different now for the Kansas City Chiefs, now not having those weapons for Patrick Mahomes here. So I like the Saints here plus the 5.5 on the spread on Monday Night Football. Let's get over to our player prop best bet for the Monday Night Football game. And we're going to get a little dicey here. We're going to get a little bit. I think this is the first time I've actually given out this particular prop here. So the exact prop is going to be Patrick Mahomes to throw an interception in this game. And you can get this number around consensus right now is at -125, over half an interception for Patrick Mahomes. So we take a look at thus far this season for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, hasn't gotten off to the greatest of starts this season, from a QBR standpoint. And at the same time as well, you take a look in the first 4 weeks of this regular season, Patrick Mahomes has thrown at least one interception. Baltimore, Cincinnati, Atlanta, and then against the Chargers. And you take a look at the Saints defense this season against the quarterback position in particular. They've intercepted the opposing quarterback at least once in every single one of their games thus far this season. They played Bryce Young week 1, 2 interceptions, 2 against Dak Prescott. They had 1 against Jalen Hurts. And then last week, we talked about the interception that Kirk Cousins threw against the Saints team. And, early on, prior to last season, that Patrick Mahomes, I guess the turnover-worthy throws were in his favor with tip passes and not really getting picked off. But last season, we saw Patrick Mahomes, the interception numbers were up for him last season. And I think he's trending in that direction again. Last year for Patrick Mahomes, 14 interceptions, 2022, 12 interceptions, and then 2021, 13 interceptions there as well. And already this season, he already has thrown 5 interceptions to the opposition, has Patrick Mahomes here. So and I'm not saying the defenses have been able to figure him out, but there have been throws that he's pressing the issue a little bit, which may be getting him in a little bit of trouble here. So I feel like this defense is going to be ready to go. I think this is a great opportunity for the Saints Steven to make it 5 straight weeks intercepting the opposing quarterback. So we're going to go player prop best bet, Patrick Mahomes to throw away interception right now at -125 here. Sleepy, what are your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes to throw one here against the Saints defense?
I actually looked for this prop myself because I was thinking about giving this out for a quarterback prop, and then I was like, "Oh, it's our Monday night game," so I ended up falling on our boy Tyler Huntley. But yeah, I like this one because when you start taking options away from a quarterback and they can't play with a big lead, they have to go out there and throw the ball. Sometimes they're trying to make some, some crazy things happen, and Mahomes can. Mahomes is one of those dudes that can go out there and make magic happen. But sometimes you press your luck a little bit too much, and I think that we'll see him do that maybe once or twice in this game. It wouldn't shock me if he threw an interception and they threw a flag and called it back and gave him the ball back. I mean, it's just kind of just been the way that things go for Mahomes in Kansas City. But I think he'll be pressing here, and this is not a team to go ahead and press against the Saints team, especially when they're ball hawking, and they're going to be looking to go ahead and get one here from Mahomes. So I'm with you here. It's going to be tough, man. He's going to have to find every window all game long, and I don't see it.
Steve, any thoughts on our Mahomes interception prop here?
Yeah, more of the same kind of deal. I said before, I think the Saints defense is a little bit underrated. I think they're going to make him uncomfortable. And I think he doesn't have the security blanket of always knowing where Rashee Rice is. And frankly, if somebody else is filling that role, whether it's Worthy or somebody else, he doesn't have that consistency, that familiarity with them. They could have a little timing issue. And sometimes that timing issue leads to turnovers. He's had a propensity to have turnovers. He has not looked good so far this year. Saints have I think they had 6 turnovers or interceptions so far this season. So it's a ton right now. I think there's a lot that's going in this direction. I think we're probably looking at a 55%, maybe even a little bit higher, a chance of him throwing it, and that makes this play worthwhile.
All right, there we go. So we'll hopefully get to 4-1 on our player prop best bets. Again, Monday Night Football, Week 5 player prop best bet. Patrick Mahomes to throw an interception right now at -125. All right, that is going to wrap it up here for this edition of the NFL Prop Show. NFL Week 5. Definitely excited for a lot of great matchups happening this week. So hopefully we do come back next week talking about our player prop best bet winner that got to the window and having another profitable week with the 12 player props that we gave out between myself, Sleepy, and Steve. Steve, anything else you want to mention, my man, before we get out of here?
No, we got a weird week, man. Last week I loved it and I bigged out. So I loved last week, and this week I don't see as many plays. Obviously, there's less games going on and stuff like that. But sometimes those are the type of weeks that all of a sudden you find that dime in the rough. So keep scratching, keeps clawing, trying to find some plays. And I think we've uncovered some here today. Excited with the player prop market this week.
Yeah, 100%. I thought this week was a little bit more difficult than last week. There's a lot that I loved last week here as well, but hopefully I think we did find some winners here for sure for our loyal listeners. Sleepy, anything else, my man, before we head our separate ways?
No, this is generally one of those times where professional handicappers, guys like us who do this, each and every week, this is kind of where we start to hit our stride because we have enough data out there. We have enough information with injuries and players, going in and coming out. And we kind of get a pretty good idea of what our opinions are going to be if the lines are right or lines are wrong. So I would not be surprised if this podcast and, all the opinions that we give out, wherever we give them out, ends up getting on a nice little hot run here because this is just a good time of year, to go ahead and kind of get in your groove now.
Yeah, I mean, now you really find out some of the identity of some of these teams. After the first 4 weeks, the regular season, but in particular for us, what these players look like for their respective offenses as well. And again, also dealing with a lot of injuries around the league there as well. So players having to step up in those spots as well. All right, that's going to do it here for this week. Appreciate everybody and all of our loyal listeners that do interact with us on Twitter as well. I know we've got a lot of whether it's been DMs or tweets at us following our plays and cashing those tickets. So hopefully we are able to continue doing that for you guys for NFL Week 5. All right, we will talk to you guys next week. Till then, good luck with your bets, and we'll talk to you guys down the road.